UFC Saudi Arabia betting and DraftKings show. We have 11 fights scheduled for this Saturday afternoon. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. We're going to get things started in the bantamweight division. This is a fight that was scheduled to be the championship for Road to UFC. Now, they were originally scheduled to face each other. There was visa issues and I think an injury on both sides. So they ended up scrapping it. They tabled it for a while. And now a few months down the road, we finally got it booked and we'll be able to see these guys square off to see who takes the crown in the bantamweight division for Road to UFC. And we'll start on the Zhao Long side. He seems like a pretty well-rounded fighter. He definitely has a ton of experience on the Chinese regional scene. He's got a ton of finishes as well. He seems to have some power, doesn't put a ton of volume out there, but is a pretty solid grappler. Like, he's very difficult to control. He works back up to his feet. He's a good scrambler as well. I think in the grappling realm in this matchup, he's going to be the one that's just a little bit more positionally sound and a little bit more alive to finish while the fight plays out on the mat as well. Now, on the flip side, Li Chang finished both of his Road to UFC fights by TKO. He's a 9-1 prospect, a little bit older at 30 years old, and he definitely has some power, but seems to be the more raw prospect out of the two. Not as much experience, like I mentioned, on the long side, but also just positionally a little bit more sloppy as well, particularly in the grappling. You know, he was able to land multiple takedowns in a lot of his fights, but mainly just due to just being super athletic and just kind of powerhousing guys, not real technique. I do think in the grappling, he's going to be at a disadvantage here, but I do think he's probably got the power advantage. So this is one where it's lower level-ish, and typically those type of fights can lead to pretty good DraftKings scores because there's room for people to get knocked down or potentially knocked out. But also, both of these guys are kind of sloppy in the grappling. We could see multiple takedowns on either side, reversals. You know, this could potentially be a sneaky fight to target, and it's going to be one that I target both sides on DraftKings. But I think the experience, the well-roundedness, and potentially the grappling edge, I got to slightly favor the long side here. We're going long by decision. That's the official pick. Next fight up in the light heavyweight division, we have Magomed Gadzhiesulov, a -360 favorite. The comeback on Brenson Ribeiro is +285. And we'll start on the Gadzhiesulov side. This guy fought on Contender Series last season, and I said coming into that fight that he was one of the best prospects, in my opinion, coming into that season relative to weight class. And what I mean by that is light heavyweight, you guys know it, it's just not that deep. You don't have to be all that great to be able to compete at the upper echelons at light heavyweight. That's just how it is. And this guy does have some decent tools. He's a very good striker. He's a Dagestani fighter, and typically we know they're grapplers, right? Well, he's more of a striker. He's got good length. He uses it well with his kicking attack. Very powerful. 5 of his 8 wins have come by knockout. Majority came early in the first round. But it's because he wasn't tested on the regional scene. Fought very lower level talent. Gets on Contender Series, fights Medina, who's got a fight booked coming up now. Now, he landed some really big shots against Medina. Medina just ate them. He's super durable. I actually thought it was a pretty solid showing. I know some people weren't super impressed by it, but he landed some big shots early. The striking looks good. And then once he started to realize he wasn't going to knock out this guy, that's when he went to the grappling. He was able to lean on Medina, control him for the majority of the rounds 2 and round 3. And I just think he's super well-rounded. He's got the striking. He's got the grappling in his back pocket if he needs to. But I think in this matchup, he's probably just going to need the striking because Brenson Ribeiro is not only coming off a first-round knockout loss against Zhang Min Yang back in February, but this dude has been knocked out multiple times on the regional scene. He was a big underdog on Dana White's Contender Series, and the main reason for that is because he's very flimsy. He does not react well to getting hit. He has basically no striking defense, so you can expect him to eat some clean shots. And he just doesn't deal well when he gets hit. And now he's facing against somebody that's a really good striker, that's really powerful. I just think Gadzhiesulov is going to catch him, and it's likely going to be pretty early here. So we're going Gadzhiesulov by TKO. That's the official pick. Next fight up, we have Muin Gafarov, a minus 161 favorite now. The comeback on Kang is plus 139. And we'll start on the Gafarov side. This guy fought on Contender Series a couple years back. And if you guys have been listening to me for a while, you know that I was a big fan of his coming into that fight. I laid the chalk there at, I think it was minus 225. It got steamed, as you know that a lot of the favorites do on Contender Series, got steamed over $1, and he ended up losing a split decision to Chad and Helliger. So obviously not great there. Now he did end up making it to the UFC. He fought Jon Castaneda and basically went to war with him, ended up losing a decision, but he was competitive, and he proved that he's going to fight hard for 15 minutes if he needs to. Now, from a skill set standpoint, he has some tools. He's a two-time Combat Sambo world champion. He's shown he can mix in takedowns, land multiple takedowns of his own, but he does get sloppy in those grappling exchanges. He gives up takedowns, he gives up his back, and he loses position regularly. So there's multiple concerns on the Gafarov side, and at times the cardio's been a little bit dicey as well. Now on the flip side, Kang has had some cardio issues of his own. 12 of his 19 wins have come by submission though, and I would expect him to be the more dangerous of the two to finish the fight if it plays out on the mat. Now Gafarov, one of the biggest things that worries me for him in this matchup is basically every fight he's making clear mistakes. He's getting caught, he's getting dropped. He got dropped by Ann Hellinger, he got hurt by Jon Castaneda as well, and then he got submitted in the first round by Said Nurmagomedov. So this guy is no stranger to getting hurt on the feet, to putting himself in bad spots in grappling exchanges. And I just think against somebody as skilled as Kang is, if you're going to give up your back or stick your head out there, he's just going to snatch it up. He's done it multiple times at the UFC level. He's also got power on the feet as well. He's knocked down multiple guys in the UFC. So I just think this is one where Gafarov, I probably trust to fight harder for 15 minutes, but I also trust that he'll probably make a mistake that he ends up paying the price for. So I'm going to slightly side with Kang here. It's another one that I'm going to have exposure to both sides on DraftKings, but the official pick is going to be Kang by submission. Next fight up, we have Rinat Fakhretdinov, a minus 355 favorite. The comeback on Nicholas Dalby is plus 280. And we'll start on the Fakhretdinov side. You guys know I'm a huge fan of this guy, have been since his first UFC fight, and he's largely been dominant in the UFC. He's landing multiple takedowns. He has that relentless grappling style, and he's good at controlling his opponents on the mat. Very smothering top game. He's got power on the feet as well, but he gets reckless on the feet, and defensively he can be had against good strikers that are going to be able to counter him and make him feel their power. I just don't think Nicholas Dalby is that guy, to be honest with you. And Dalby, I think, is going to struggle to defend takedowns here. He defends around 60%, and he's really, like, Dalby's been on this great run, but he's really been fortunate, some close decisions that went his way. And I just think he's going to struggle in a matchup like this. Somebody that's as relentless as Fakhretdinov is with the grappling, and I expect him to have success pursuing that game plan. So I think he's going to get his hand raised here. We're going Fakhretdinov by decision. That's the official pick. Next up, we have Muhammad Naimov, a minus 130 favorite now. The comeback on Felipe Lima is plus 110. And this line has kind of bounced all around since it opened. Lima, of course, making his short notice UFC debut, replacing Melsik Bagdasaryan. Now, I'll start off by saying this. I am not a Muhammad Naimov guy. I've talked in the past how he's been super fortunate for his run out at the UFC. He had a comeback Hail Mary knockout against Jamie Malarkey. He had the Nathaniel Wood fight that basically came down to one mistake by Wood, and he's just gotten really lucky in my opinion. Now, he's not a bad fighter, but there has been at least some improvements that we've seen from Naimov. He has power on the feet. We saw in that Wood fight, even though he was fortunate to win that, we've seen the wrestling improve, the grappling. He's getting better, and that's what we like to see. Now, the flip side, Lima is 12-1 prospect, young kid, looks pretty well-rounded. He's the former Octagon MMA bantamweight champion. Now, he was already in camp to defend that title, so even though it's short notice, he has been training, so that's always good to see. But I still think this is probably too much too soon for him. Now, I do think he belongs in the UFC, and I think he can compete at the 135-pound division. But when you're moving up a weight class against somebody as physically strong as Naimov, who's going to be more powerful than you, who's improving in the wrestling department as well, like, I just struggle to see where Lima really has big advantages here. And if that's the case, and he's going to be popular on DraftKings, I'm okay with getting away from it. I'll have some exposure, but I'm leaning more so on the Naimov side. We're saying Naimov by decision. That's the official pick. Next fight up, we have Nasrat Haqparast, a minus 238 favorite. The comeback on Jared Gordon is plus 195. And we'll start on the Haqparast side. He's coming off a first-round knockout victory over Jamie Malarkey in December. And that one felt really good for me because Haqparast is known as a decision guy. He basically takes everyone to a decision. He's only had one knockout at the UFC level. So the odds really were just overcorrected on Haqparast being a decision guy that I was able to get like +4, somewhere in the +400s for him to win by knockout against Jamie Malarkey. And if you give me almost anybody +400, 4-1 to knock out Jamie Malarkey, I'm probably going to bite. So that one felt really good there. Love to see it. Potentially, he could have another opportunity to win by knockout here against Jared Gordon, who we know has clear durability issues. He's been knocked out multiple times in his career, not even counting the head clash knockout against Bobby Green that wasn't that long ago. So there's certainly durability issues on the Gordon side. I think on the feet, Haqparast is going to have a clear speed advantage in the boxing and the footwork. But I also see the case for Jared Gordon as a live underdog here. And if he's not going to be that popular on DraftKings, then I am going to look to be overweight to the underdog because Jared Gordon is one of the better grapplers that Haqparast has faced. And we know that's a clear leak in Haqparast's game. While he does have solid takedown defense and he's a good boxer, the times when people were able to take him down, they kind of had their way with him. Dan Hooker landed 3 takedowns, controlled him for about half the fight. Even dating back in his UFC debut back in 2017, he was taken down multiple times there as well. He's been pretty fortunate in terms of the matchmaking where he hasn't had a ton of people outside of those fights really look to take him down. So I think this could be one where there is a little bit of value on the underdog just because the upside is pretty big, because if Gordon just lands multiple takedowns here, he could look like a hindsight favorite. You just have to worry about him on the feet because he is getting older, he's slower, and he's probably going to be losing the fight unless he gets those takedowns. So it's one where I see the case for both sides. I think Haqparast winning a decision is probably the more likely outcome, but in terms of DraftKings, I definitely have more interest in the underdog. The official pick is going to be Haqparast by decision. Which brings us to our next matchup in the light heavyweight division. As these two kick off the main card, we have Volkan Oezdemir, the slight favorite at -112, with Johnny Walker on the comeback at -108. And we'll start on the Oezdemir side. He's a guy who I think has been underrated at times. You know, his last fight against Bogdan Guskov, he looked like a hindsight huge favorite there. The line was pretty favorable in that spot. I know a lot of people jumped all over that, but also in previous matchups where people have kind of counted him out, he's proven that he is, you know, still a competitor at this stage in his career. He's got powerful striking, he does have knockout upside, and even at times, we've seen him mix in the ground game a little bit to a degree. So he's a guy that's pretty well-rounded. I worry about the durability because he is getting a little bit older. We have seen him knocked out multiple times in his career. Now, speaking of durability issues, Johnny Walker has been knocked out 5 times in his career, including in his last fight against Magomed Ankalaev back in January. And so that's always a concern with Johnny Walker. You also have to worry about the fight IQ with Johnny Walker, even though lately he's turned into more of a point fighter, which is kind of concerning for DraftKings because we want to see that old school Johnny Walker that's going to throw the flying knees, that's going to, you know, be doing all this crazy stuff to try to get that first round knockout. And I think he still does have that in him, but you just can't trust him to fight that game plan because I think because he's been knocked out so many times that now he tries to play that point fighting style, kick the legs, try to disengage, maybe grapple a little bit even. And this is a spot where I think it just has a wide range of outcomes because we can't really project how he's going to fight this type of game plan. And both guys have durability issues, so there's still that risk that somebody pops off and puts up a big score on DraftKings. But you just have to know that if you're playing this fight, there is that significant downside to where if nobody finishes the fight early, it might turn into a low scoring decision where the winner puts up like 55 points. And if that's the case, you definitely don't want it on DraftKings. But it's going to be one that I think I'm leaning towards just being overweight and accepting that risk. But it's going to be one that I talk through more on the DraftKings deep dive show at fightnumbers.com for subscribers on Thursday evening. But ultimately, I'm going to side with Oezdemir just because I trust him a little bit more, particularly in the durability department. And I think he's got more potential to catch Johnny Walker and put his lights out. We're going Volkan, no time Oezdemir, by knockout. That's the official pick. Next up, we have Shera Magomedov, minus 245 favorite. The comeback on Jolton Lutterbach is plus 200. And this one I'm not going to spend a ton of time on because I think Lutterbach, from what I saw, I'm not really convinced that he belongs at the UFC level. He seems like more of a regional journeyman type of fighter. Now, he does have a little bit of grappling upside because we know that Magomedov is very one-dimensional. What Magomedov has is very good striking. He's a 12-0 undefeated prospect. We saw in his UFC debut against Bruno Silva. He might not be the most potent finisher, but the dude's striking is very good. Now, where I worry about Magomedov, maybe in this matchup, but I think more so going forward, is that he's so one-dimensional that I suspect that the defensive grappling and the cardio might not be that great. Now, we'll see what it looks like once he starts to face better opponents. I just don't think that Lutterbach is that guy. Now, obviously, I could be wrong, and if that's the case, he's probably going to be super low on DraftKings, so if you're playing a bunch of lineups, maybe just take that chance. But ultimately, I think Magomedov is probably just going to be able to keep this on the feet and get the better of the striking and potentially hurt Lutterbach and get him out of there. We're going Magomedov by TKO. That's the official pick. And this next fight, we have Kelvin Gastelum, a minus 245 favorite. The comeback on Daniel Rodriguez is plus 200. And I'm never an advocate for backing Gastelum as a big favorite because he's just the style of fighter that typically doesn't cover these big price tags. So in that sense, I get why people would have some interest in Rodriguez as an underdog, but I also am just kind of done with Rodriguez at this point. He looked terrible against Ian Gary on his way to getting knocked out in the first round. He turns 38 years old later this year, and I think at this stage in his career, the speed, the durability, a lot of his things are just going downhill. And against somebody like Gastelum, who is super well-rounded, who's going to be the faster striker, dancing in and out of the pocket, getting the better of the boxing exchanges. And then I also think Gastelum might have some sneaky wrestling upside as well. If that's the case, even though I don't like the price, I think Gastelum probably gets his hand raised here. We're going Gastelum by decision. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our co-main event as Sergey Pavlovich is a minus 225 favorite. The comeback on Alexander Volkov is plus 185. And I'm just a big fan of Pavlovich, even though I bet against him when he fought for the belt against Tom Aspinall last November. He ended up getting knocked out in the first round. Now, he hurt Aspinall early in that fight, but Aspinall, recovered, regained himself, and ended up clipping Pavlovich, put him out. Pretty brutal knockout there. And it was very exciting to see Aspinall capture the belt. Unfortunate for my guy Pavlovich here. Now, he's going to look to rebound this weekend against Volkov, who's a very good striker, who's a very powerful striker in his own right, very well-rounded, technically sound. But I just think the power of Pavlovich is really just the ultimate cheat code in this division because he is dangerously powerful. 15 of his 18 wins have come by knockout. If you can't put him out like Aspinall did, or take him down and just smother him on the mat like Overeem did in his UFC debut, if you can't do either of those things, I'm not sure you're beating Pavlovich. Now, Volkov would need to survive round one, drag him into deeper waters, and take over late. Now, that's possible, but I think more times than not, Pavlovich just hurts him early and gets him out of there. We're going Pavlovich by TKO in round one. That's the official pick. Which brings us to our main event in the middleweight division as Robert Whittaker was originally scheduled to face Khamzat Chimaev, who we know pulled out of the fight due to food poisoning now, and Ikram Aliskerov, who was scheduled to fight Antonio Tricoli last week, pulled out of that fight to replace Khamzat for this matchup. Much bigger fight, much bigger spotlight. And I think this is a pretty decent matchup for him too. Even though Robert Whittaker is super well-rounded, the one concern with Whittaker has been that durability. He's been knocked out 3 times in his career, and he's also been hurt even in fights that he's won, even as recent as this last fight against Paulo Costa, where he was clearly winning the fight and he ended up getting hurt. So like, this is always going to be an issue for him, and he's facing somebody in Aliskerov that is very dangerous. He's won both of his UFC fights by first round knockout, and we know he's a good grappler as well. He just hasn't really had to show it at the UFC level yet. So I think Ikram has multiple paths to victory here. I'd worry if this fight does get extended, because I think the experience, the cardio, the well-roundedness of Whittaker would probably end up taking over. So in that respect, Whittaker could be a potential live betting spot if he drops 1 or 2 of the first couple rounds. But I think Ikram could really test the durability here. And I think this could be one where a lot of people put confidence in Bobby Knuckles, and he ends up getting knocked out, similar to what we saw against Dricus du Plessis. So I'm going to go with Ikram here. Ikram by TKO. That's the official pick. And as always, guys, fightnumbers.com will have DraftKings player rankings, ownership projections, ton of other content up there as well for Prize Pick, Underdog. We got the odds screen, which updates in real time for live betting. You are doing yourself a disservice by not checking out Fight Numbers and letting me know what you think about it. Best of luck this week, guys. We'll catch you next week.